wealth of expertise in IT governance, information security management systems, or ISMS consulting, audit, and training. His extensive experience spans across various countries, including Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and India. He holds a deep understanding of cybersecurity and IT frameworks and standards.
Thank you for that, Tisha. So for today's webinar, Fortifying Against Cyber Threats with NIST Framework is especially timely as data security breaches continue to rise, impacting businesses worldwide. Considering that the Philippines ranks fourth globally in cyber attacks and the cost of each breach is staggering, it's crucial to address these challenges. With Mr. Vivek's expertise and insights, we were well equipped to navigate this landscape and enhance our digital security. Apex Global Learning proudly presents this one-hour webinar where we will delve into strategies to elevate our cybersecurity defenses using the NIST framework. As we embark on this journey together, let's explore the NIST framework's potential to secure our digital future. I'm so excited for this. How about you, Trisha?
Yes, I am too, Ina. And do you know that we have a surprise for the participants at the end of this webinar? Yes, you actually heard it right. So stay tuned for interesting activities and a surprise which we will be revealing at the end of this session. Now, without any further ado, I request Mr. Vivek to get started.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon and happy Friday. I'm Vivek, based out of Melbourne. I'm a cybersecurity consultant and working with a company called Trans in Australia. It's the middle of winter for us here. It's quite chilly. And definitely, I think you guys have much better weather at this point of time. Right. So today's topic is mainly to discuss about the NIST framework and how we can use NIST framework to protect your organization from different cyber attacks. And first of all, thanks for everyone to join this call. And I'm sure most of you must be working in cybersecurity or assurance in some sort of similar field and having interest in the NIST framework. So today we're basically going to understand the typical cybersecurity threats. I think it's now most companies are in kind of some kind of attack these days. No organization is spared, no countries is spared. So most of the companies have encountered some sort of other attacks on a daily basis. You might have some minor incidents every now and then. So it's nothing new about it. So it's there in the wild, but it's basically we need to look at how do we use different security controls and frameworks to protect our organization. So today we're going to discuss about the types of security threats, about the cybersecurity framework, about the NIST cybersecurity framework in action, and we'll look at some cybersecurity program example. Right. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always type it in the chat, and I won't be able to see the chat. I think the team from Apex Global will be able to inform me if there's any question. So I think most of the organizations nowadays, you definitely have your email IDs. You'll be using your mobile devices for your work. You use some sort of cloud services for your business services or business processes. And with the COVID, a lot of companies have experienced working from home. That brings itself a new set of challenges. And while we have this COVID and people work from home, I think many organizations let the employees to use their mobile or laptop to work from home. And you can certainly imagine the type of risk where exposing the company's data to personal devices. And we also have a lot of companies undergoing digital transformation, establishing e-commerce websites, or doing some sort of online services. So I think, again, back to COVID, a lot of companies started to do online services, right? So be it delivery, be it restaurants. So most companies who never thought of going online had to go online because of COVID. And with that comes a lot of cybersecurity risk. And the latest hot topic is mainly around the AI and the ChatGPT. So I'm pretty sure most of you have at least used ChatGPT once to see what's happening there. So that itself brings a lot of challenges. So a lot of companies trying to use how to adopt these kind of technologies to their environment, or what are the threats these technology will pose to the organization. So and finally, we also have APIs, the application interface. So again, with companies using a lot of cloud-based services, and you have to connect to these services from your application to these cloud-based services, or you're connecting from one organization to another organization using these APIs. So that in itself brings a lot of different challenges. So throughout this webinar, we do have some sort of quizzes to check some pulse and check some understanding of the people who are participating here. So the very first one is that just think about what do you think is the biggest cybersecurity concern you have in your organization. I think the poll will be launched by the best global team. I'll give a minute or two to see the responses. Let me know once the poll is completed. Right, I think people have responded. So we have 29% people say that ransomware is a major attack. Yes, I think ransomware is what most likely the organization may experience if you don't safeguard your critical assets. So when we think of any cybersecurity attacks, people only think of the bigger nation state or sophisticated hackers. But nowadays, ransomware kits are available even for $50 in the market. So anyone can just purchase them and attack a company and try to get some money. And again, these are not some large money. They might just attack a small business and try to get $10,000 from them. And that's about it. So that's being the major kind of a concern for a lot of companies, especially like example, if take in US, a lot of councils, a lot of federal organizations have been impacted by ransomware. So there are even companies offering insurance to protect against these kind of ransomware attacks. We do have third-party risks. I think more and more companies are now relying on third-party software, third-party services, third-party companies to provide or to support your business process. So it could be not your company who's exposed to these risks, but your third party could be exposed, and thereby your organization is also exposed. For example, you get a consultant or some contractor who has your company's user IDs and password to do some services, and they get compromised. And in this case, even your organization also get compromised. Insider threats, I think most people, when think of, again, cyber attacks, only people focus on external things like hackers, but quite often we have insiders, or basically the employees or contractors, who are not safeguarded their critical assets, who are exposed their accounts, or who have been careless and gone and clicked some phishing link, or who have shared some password with other people, or even intentionally, like malicious employees who are leaving the company, want to sabotage. That's also like a biggest number of threats. And of course, most people are concerned about data loss. So when you talk about cyber attack, mainly there are only two reasons. So people want to disrupt your business, or they want to steal data. So data leakage or data loss mainly talks about stealing data, selling in the dark web, or holding it to ransom, or in generally they want to steal some company secrets. So that's some of the key types of cybersecurity concerns. I think it's rightly points, and most of the organizations, like I mentioned, are concerned about data leakage. So in Australia, we had some really large cyber attacks in the past few months. We almost have every month a major one. So most recent being one of the telco, Optus. So millions of records were exposed. So most of the employees, obviously, most of the users or customers, driver license, passport numbers were exposed. And bigger than that was another insurance provider called Medibank, whose data was also exposed. Again, there is a theory that in a few months' time, there'll be no Australia left with the no data exposed. Almost every data is going to be exposed. So that's the reality we're facing today. And I want to just share this slide on the different type of cyber risks which the company experiences. So this is a data or a slide from Microsoft. And so when you talk about inside and external, so inside that you have disgruntled employees or people who are negligent or careless or having a low awareness. And externally, we have different hackers trying to access your systems either by asking some employees to click some phishing link and then get access to your cloud infrastructure or even your on-premise services. Again, because a lot of employees use cloud-based software, that's also risky sometimes, especially when employees goes and purchases cloud services without the IT or the security knowing about it. So that's again a big risk out there. So basically, we can look at internal and external risk, and especially for some critical companies who also uses the IoT, the Internet of Technology or the operational technology, they also have a bigger risk, especially where any cybersecurity incidents can result in physical attacks. So these are some examples in Philippines. I used to work in Philippines 20 years ago for a couple of years. I worked across a few companies out there and help them to get certified to the ISO 27001 or help them to align to the different cybersecurity frameworks. So that's a bit of experience out there. But then I think no days goes without in Philippines or any other country without any cybersecurity news. So here there's some examples where a company, on estimate, they say that every day you're losing about $500,000 throughout the country to different types of attacks, right? So there's an online gambling company who got a phishing kind of attack. I'll not go into detail. So there has been a company called Gcash, again, fell prey to the phishing scheme and again exposed some users' passwords and then through which they're exposed. And luckily, there are a few people arrested, but then the law takes a bit more time to catch up to these kind of attacks. There's also example of Philippine Airlines server data breach. I think more and more we see these things, data breach and things like that. And quite often, these attacks are not sophisticated, right? So when we think of cyber attack, people think there's some really smart hacker behind and trying to access systems. But quite often, the case is just that there was data exposed already. For example, you have an API which was not configured properly, and it's then open. Nobody tested this, and somebody discovered it. So it's not really a sophisticated attack. They just happen to discover that there's a data lying or there's the API exposed to the internet, and they can sneak into a company and get those records. So when you think of cybersecurity attacks, don't think it's always sophisticated. It could be sometimes very simple to get your data. Some more examples out there. Right. So when we talk about cybersecurity, I think the simplest definition we can think is that how do you safeguard your critical information assets, right? So take any company, for example, you have some critical information. So this could be your customer data. This could be your employees' data. This could be your trade secrets, or this could be a critical financial information of the company. So most of these are basically your critical information asset. The security talks about mainly about what are the controls you in place, or what are the safeguards going to put to protect your critical information assets. And I think most of you might be familiar with the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So when you talk about cybersecurity, these are the key objectives. So you're trying to protect the data's confidentiality so that only the right people can have access to. You're trying to protect the integrity so no unauthorized modification happens, and trying to protect or ensure availability of the key systems. Now, different organizations have different needs, right? So if you talk about healthcare sector, I think they need to ensure the patient's data is kept confidential. So for them, confidentiality is more important. If you take some example, like in bank, for example, so they also need to ensure confidentiality. They also need to ensure integrity of the financial information and so on. Now, if you take example in transport sector, yes?
Sir, we
Yep,
do have a question in our chat box from Mr.
sure.
Dario Rivera.
Yep.
His question is, in Australia or maybe in Philippines, if you know how security professionals do responsible reporting or in good faith about private companies' data leak without being sued by the said company, considering that they not allow or give permission for independent security testing and no bug bounty program.
I'm trying to understand the question again. So in Australia, if you know any security professional do responsible reporting in good faith about private companies doing without being sued by the said, yeah, this is a very interesting question. So often this comes under some sort of a whistleblower act or whistleblower policies within the organization, right? So some organization, like they have these policies where if they find any kind of those kind of weaknesses, they have some mechanism to go and report it. Now, at the same time, like if you're an external to organization and if you found any weakness with those companies, it's again a tricky thing on how you're going to expose it, right? Because you're not a contractor for that company to find these defects, unless they have any bug bounty program where you can go and report them, right? But otherwise, I think at this point of time, there's no like such reporting mechanism available. But often companies are happy to hear if you go through right channels on what are the weaknesses. So what companies does is that they do testing, right? So they do testing where they invite some external penetration testers or the ethical hackers to perform testing and provide them the report. Or a lot of software development companies, right? So these are not enterprises, but these are the companies creating products. So they have these bug bounty programs where they allow the external people to go and hack or find those vulnerabilities and provide a report to companies, right? So at this point of time, we don't have any such kind of what I call a formal mechanism, but a lot of companies do it a bit discreetly. So example, I know one company, they're about to purchase another company. So as part of due diligence, they did the security testing even without the company knowing about it, right? Now, it's not completely illegal because website is there out in the public. So anyone can go and try and see what happens with that, right? And they're trying to understand the vulnerabilities without breaking the website or breaking the key systems. So people do that often, especially as part of the due diligence or as part of, to ensure their company's security framework is up to date. Yeah. Right. It's a good question. Any other questions? Right. Okay. Oops, did I jump? Yeah. Yeah, so I was talking about the CIA triad, and then just to mention about availability. So there are some companies for them availability is important. Like example, I'm in a transport sector, so more than confidentiality, it's the availability of the key systems to ensure the transport is running smooth. So that's the different security objectives. So we have another quick poll now to understand how good or how confident are you in your organization's cybersecurity practices? Take a minute and answer this. Let's see. So let me know once the results are in. Right. Right. So 75% of people are mentioned they're somewhat confident about your organization security practices. So there's no right or wrong answer for this. So it's good to know that at least 15% of companies are very confident and 10% not confident. Yeah, so I think it's very hard to say, especially there's so many standards and frameworks out in the market. And again, the complexity in terms of changing technology, it's very hard to always say that we are well prepared. Again, because example, a company never did any kind of cloud services, and now you went and procured some cloud services. It comes with new risk. So is your current organization prepared to handle such risks, right? So similarly, your company never allowed work from home, and now you're allowing work from home or hybrid. And this is something you're now prepared for before. So how good is your current practices to manage those kind of risks? So it keeps changing. But one thing is important is that for you to continuously assess and see where you are in terms of the overall maturity. Right. So we'll discuss about the frameworks. So there are different frameworks in the market. I think the most common being the ISO 27001. So most of you might be familiar with that, the Information Security Management System. There's also PCI DSS, which is especially used in companies where they transact large number of credit cards. And there's also the CIS, it's a Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls. So they have a framework or list of controls, which can be also used to secure organization. And then comes NIST. So NIST is a cybersecurity framework, which helps you to assess your organization maturity and improve based on the risks you face. Now, there's nothing like which is the best and which is not good. It really depends on your organization's needs. All these frameworks have some good points and some negative points. And all these frameworks kind of complement each other. But today we're going to discuss mainly about the NIST frameworks, what it is, and how it can help your organization. So NIST is from US, right? So this initially there was a standard called NIST 853. So that is a risk management framework, and it was a list of controls which was designed and developed by NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology in US. And mainly it was for the government sector within US. But soon they found that this can be useful for many other companies, not just government sector, and they published the CSF, which is cybersecurity framework. Now, this framework is completely voluntary. It's not mandatory, means that you don't have to be really certified or assessed with that. You can use this as a reference to improve your organization's security. And this framework is based on risk, and it includes a lot of security standards and best practices from the wider market. It provides a common language and structure for organization. It is free. You can just go to the website and download the standards, and you can tailor according to your business needs. And recently, there's also a privacy section of the framework where if you're looking at improving your privacy of your data, you can use this framework. And it can complement with any of your other frameworks or testing frameworks, basically. And this framework can be used by any organization and any sector. Like initially, the first version, or basically the set of controls, the SP 853, that was mainly for US public sector and critical infrastructure. But this framework can be used by any organization across the world. And whether you have already any practices in place or don't have, or you want to know where to start from. So basically any company or any organization can use them. And they keep updating the framework. So it's good to go and check every now and then what are the controls they add and use them to improve your security. So what this NIST framework basically does is that it first helps you to assess your current security posture, right? Or the risk posture, how well you're doing, and describe a target posture. And then create a program to close these gaps. And basically talks about how do you communicate with internal and external stakeholders to improve your overall cybersecurity. Towards the end of the slide, I have a presentation or a slide talks about the program itself, how instead of the bullet points to show you an actual program. Right? And I hope I can keep the time. Right. So a quick question. How many of you are already familiar with the NIST cybersecurity functions? right? So the results are in. So 50%, almost 43% have said they're not familiar, and almost 50% have said somewhat familiar. You might have heard about it somewhere. And 10% have said they're very familiar with the NIST framework. That is good. So this webinar is basically an introduction of what is the NIST framework. I'll just go to this next slide. So basically the framework has three main components. So there is the core framework. That's what we're going to discuss mainly today. There is tiers called the implementation tiers on different levels. On basically talks about the risk management implementation tiers. And there's something called profile. So profile is something unique to your organization based on your organizational context and the risk. And you can use the framework to create your organizational profile to understand your risks, gaps, and create an action plan. So I'll just quickly show you the website. I hope you can see my screen still. Yep, right. So if you go to the website called NIST Cyber Framework, you can actually go and download them. So it's free. So you have the PDF version, there's the Excel version. And if you download an Excel version, it looks something like this. So you have the function, the category, and subcategory and all the stuff. So I'll come to this in a while. So basically, you can just go to the website called the NIST.gov Cyber Framework and Framework, and you get a lot of information there with some additional information. Right. So the framework, the version 1.1, consists of 5 core functions. There is a draft version of version 2.0, which has 6 functions, which is expected to be released in early 2024. But right now it's undergoing review and it's a draft version. But as of today, the published version has 5 core functions, which is basically the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So those are the 5 functions. So we'll quickly see in depth on these 5 areas. So the first function called identify talks about identifying the different risks. So you can think of identify as basically identify the risks to your assets, your data, and your processes. And protect talks about what sort of controls or what kind of mechanisms is there to protect your organizations from those risks.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you again, but we have another question, which
Sure.
is, in that new version, are there substantial updates related to Gen AI?
So the new version, yes, no, the new version does have some substantial update, especially like from 5, it's going to 6, where they focus a bit more on governance. There is a bit more reshuffling of some of the process areas, and they made one major update is that the new version comes with something called implementation examples. So the current version doesn't come with examples. It talks about the function, the categories, subcategories, and references. But the new version goes a step beyond and gives you some implementation examples on what are the different outcomes expected for each of those functions and subcategories. But definitely, it's a significant change to the current version. Yep. I hope that answers the questions. Yeah. So protect function talks about protecting your or putting the controls in place to protect your assets. And detect talks about the processes involved in detecting any kind of incidents, basically, or events. And respond talks about what kind of actions or what type of response procedures you have if you detect any cybersecurity incident. And finally, recover talks about how do you recover from an incident, right? So that's the very simplest terms of these 5 core functions. So identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So in my next slide talks a bit more about that. So you see there is a function, there's a category, and each category has an ID, so by an identification number. So asset management is ID.am, governance is ID.gv, and so on, right? So basically think of identify talks about identifying what are the assets in organization and what needs protection, right? So you do an asset management or asset process where identify those assets, you understand your business environment by doing, again, risk assessment, understand who are your customers, who are your vendors, who are your stakeholders, and understand governance. So what are the risks with your existing processes, policies, and procedure? It also talks about your risk assessment processes, talks about your risk management strategy, talks about your risk appetite and tolerance levels. And it also talks about your supply chain risk management. So this is something importantly added in version 1.1 compared to the previous version, because most companies use third-party services. So if any weaknesses in your third party will also impact you. So how are you going to manage the supply chain risk? No, the second function, protect, talks mainly about the safeguards or controls. So how do you safeguard your identity or the user access? How do you protect your users, or how do you bring awareness to users and protecting any kind of risk from the users? How do you protect your data and information? And how do you maintain your technology, different types of technologies like OS, applications, and so on? And what types of controls you're going to put for these technology? I will show an example of this in an upcoming slide. That'll be much easier. Detect talks about how do you monitor your IT to detect any kind of event, right? So you can also think of this like more like your security operations center. So they do log analysis, they do event monitoring, and any kind of event which is abnormal, it gets discovered and then you respond to it, right? So that's the detection. And respond talks about based on detection, you will have some response. Example, you notice a huge amount of data being going out of some server, and you detect that, or you detect there is a sensitive data being leaked from one of your servers. The next question is that, what are you going to do about it? That's a response. So you may have some playbooks, like how are you going to address this data leak or any kind of a phishing which happened, and how do you recover finally? So this could be like recovering from your alternative sites, or you may have, you want to clean up your database, rebuild it, and recover, those sort of steps. So those are the 5 functions and the 5 or the different categories over there. So again, today we'll not go through individual categories. Just to give you a flavor of what are these 5 functions, we do plan to have detailed trainings to go through all of these different categories and subcategories. Right. So I mentioned about categories. So we do have a subcategory, and we do have information references, right? So NIST has 5 functions. It has 23 categories, and there are like 108 subcategories. So it's quite an extensive framework, gives an extensive guidance, and it also provides informative references. So at this point, I'll just quickly go to the Excel template I showed earlier. So an example is that under the asset management, it says that software platforms and applications with organizations are inventoried, right? Now, the NIST doesn't say how you're going to do it. The NIST just says what you must do. It says that you must have your software applications and platforms inventoried. It doesn't say you must do it through Excel, or you must do it through ServiceNow, or you must do some data discovery tools. It doesn't talk about that. So it's up to the organization, because a small organization might just use an Excel template, or a large enterprise might use sophisticated tool for managing that. So the how part is left to your company based on your risk and your context. So NIST talks about what you must do, right? It talks about the platforms and applications, for example, here. It also gives you reference for the other frameworks and standards, mainly these 6 items. So you have the CIS, is the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls. You have COVID from ISACA. The IEC or the ISA 62443, it's for the industrial automation. Mainly, it's the operational technology. You have the 27001, which is ISMS, and the NIST has 853, which is a detailed security controls. So that has over 500 controls in place now. So they give reference to this. So you can refer to this and apply those best practices to achieve this subcategory goal. Okay. So this is a summary of the different functions. And so again, I'll be coming to this slide shortly. I'm conscious of time. So there's a quick quiz on the framework itself.
So hi everyone, this is Neha from Apex Global Learning. So let's begin with a quick quiz on its framework. So let me share my screen. there. So yeah, so you have the Mentimeter poll visible on the screen. So all you have to do is scan the QR code. I hope you all have your mobile phones in hand. So please do scan the QR code, or you can directly go to menti.com and enter the code that is visible here on the screen. So here you can see clearly. Thank you for the thumbs ups. All right. So let's begin the quiz. Please do enter your name or a nickname to get started. So you just have to open your mobile phones, go to menti.com and enter the code, or you can just simply log in using the QR code that was visible on the screen earlier. And now you just have to enter your name or a nickname to get started. So question number 1 will be on the screen. So you just have to answer via your phone. So the question is, which NIST framework core function aids in pinpointing and handling software vulnerabilities within your organization's recently deployed application?
Right. Okay. I think most of you got correct. Yeah, this belongs to the identity function, identifying the vulnerabilities.
Great. So let's have the leaderboard and see who is on the top of the list. So we have Mr. Skits, and then Annie, and then we have Mr. Tom. So the fastest person, I mean, who answers the fastest wins. So be quick while answering the questions. So the second question. So answer fast to get more points. So the question is, when your organization detects any suspicious activity, which NIST framework function involves taking the immediate steps to contain and mitigate the impact? Okay, we have the votes. So the right answer is Mr. Vivek. It's response.
That's right. That's right.
So let's see who answered it right. Wow, we have Mr. Dario, and Miss Anne is already. Oh, okay. So we have Miss Anne first, and then followed by Mr. Dario. Congratulations, Anne. So you're on the top position right now. So we have the final question coming up, guys. Right. So the third question goes, your organization has discovered vulnerabilities in critical applications. Which NIST framework function guides your actions to strengthen that application? You have 12 seconds to answer. Great. Wow. Okay. So the right answer is protect. Sir Vivek, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes a bit confusing here. I think a lot of people also mentioned respond. So you discover the vulnerabilities, and which function guides you actually to strengthen, right? So to respond, let's say you already have find the vulnerabilities. So first you do vulnerability scanning, identify the gaps, and then harden the server example in this case. That's the protection. And then when you have any incident, that's when the response comes to. So I think that's where the confusion is. So in this case, it basically talks about you discovered vulnerabilities already based on your scanning, and then what will you do after that? So like something like hardening to harden the servers. Yeah. That comes into protection.
Thank you. So let's see the leaderboard. Wow. Wow, we have Mr. Boti on the first place. And well done to the winner. Congratulations. Thank you.
Good job, buddy. Right. So I will go back to my screen. Right. So conscious of time, I'll try to speed through a few things, like how the different organizations applies NIST. Like I mentioned earlier, different organizations like healthcare, financial, manufacturing, tech startup, or even small companies can apply for that. They do get various benefits. So I will not go to that because I want to focus on a couple of more slides. So the real benefits, again, the website I showed you, you can just go and take a look at the various profiles and examples of how companies have used them and how they benefited. Just conscious time, so I want to focus on these, the NIST CSF in action. So how do we look at this, right? So let it go off already. Just give me 1 second. So if you think about the overall framework, so at the bottom you can see certain processes focus on planning.
Sir Vivek, I think we cannot see your screen. Sorry.
See, all right, just give me a second.
Yeah, there.
Right. Right. So if you take a look at this framework, there are several ways to interpret or have a different views. So at the bottom, you can see we can group this as a planning phase. So you identify, do risk assessment, and talks about planning what to be done. Then the protect and detect talks about building the capabilities to protect your data and key assets. And then rest of it talks about your operations. So this your security operation talks about how do you detect any kind of incidents, how do you respond and recover. So that's one way to look at this framework. And other way is that if you look at the red line, it divides the framework into two groups. So one group talks about prevention. So these are the controls, or these are the activities and processes you will implement to prevent an incident, right? So you're mainly trying to see that what can I do to understand the risk and what safeguards I can put to prevent an incident. But obviously, there'll be always some weaknesses in these safeguards, and you may still have incidents. So the second part, or the second group of these functions, talks about how do you respond in case you have an incident. So that's one way of looking at this framework. Now, yet another way is that you can try to group these assets into different categories. So take any organization. You have devices, you got networks, you got applications, data, and user. So these are your key assets. And we can map it across the different functions of NIST. And at the bottom, if you see that, let's try to see if I can put the pointer. Yeah. So at the bottom, you see that there is a degree of dependency. So as we go across the framework, it's less technology dependent. So in the identify and protect phase, you have technology like the scanners, the pen testing, and things like that, and you put the different mechanisms of protection. But as you go down, it's mainly depending on people. How do you respond and recover and things like that? And for all these phases, the process remains the same. It means every phase has different processes. Now, this is an example you can actually try to map on the activities you do or the controls and solutions you can do across the different phases. So for devices, you can do a vulnerability scanning or asset management to identify the risky devices. You can do a network vulnerability scanning or use NetFlow to identify the risks with your network. You can use pen testing or the tools like the SAST and DAST. This is your application testing tools. And or you can use some fuzzers to identify the vulnerabilities in your applications. You can do a data discovery audit and the discovery activity to understand your different data and the risk with that. You can do like a phishing simulation to understand who are your weak users in your organization. So that's the first step on identification. And next is the protection. You'll be using a lot of technology out there or processes and controls Like for devices, you might be using an endpoint protection. You might be having some kind of allow listing for different devices. You may have a host intrusion protection system or prevention system in this case. Now, don't be bogged down by these acronyms. This is not exhaustive. There could be a lot more controls. For network, you might consider like a zero trust network architecture. You might use the network segmentation. You can implement firewalls, IPS, IDS to protect your network. For application, you can have the RAS, which is the runtime application processes based at the WAF to manage your application vulnerabilities. You can have encryption for data. You may implement DLP to protect your data leakage. You may have a database access monitoring. So basically to see if anyone accesses data we're not supposed to access. You may have a DRM, your digital rights management to protect data. And for users, you might use security awareness training, can implement MFAs and things like that. So these are like the controls to protect your assets for the different types of assets listed up here, right? And next, what are the things you can put in place to detect these things? So typically you may have an endpoint detection, your Microsoft Defender and so on, other software, or the extended detector and responses. You may have the user entity behavior analytics tools. So you may implement all these kind of tools to understand what goes or how do you detect incidents, like source code incident, source code compromise, or logic bombs, or how do you analyze or understand the insider threat and so on, right? And the response is typically playbooks. You may have different playbooks to respond to a phishing or a ransomware or a DDoS attack and so on. So those are respond. And as you come towards the right hand of the framework, it's mostly manual steps like backups and things like that. So this is one way of looking at the framework and the controls and solution. Now, this is an example you can think of. Let's say you have an endpoint which got compromised. This is the first thing you notice, that using a detecting process or detect process, that your defender or one of these tools detected that some endpoint is acting odd, but then you don't know what to do. And you go and check the particular endpoint, workstation, for example, and you check that it's fully patched, it's locked down, and the 2FA is on for that, so there's no issue with that. But then you focus on the user of that laptop, and you see that this user has failed the previous user phishing or the phishing simulation and has not completed training. So could this be a case where the user clicked on the phish? So you can go and do some log analysis and check whether any such thing happened, and that's why you have this endpoint behaving odd. So there's another example. You notice that the DLP alerts are going off, DDoS protection. So, and you notice that a large number of data is going on, and these are encrypted data. And then you notice that 1 GB of data is sent to China per hour. But then it's nothing odd, because you do have a what you call a B2B or a project with a Chinese plant. It's not odd, but then you notice that these are the servers with blueprints of the different plants are being sent out. But then when you assess it, it shows that it's a normal logins. But again, you go and check who are the people who are assigned to this Chinese project and any issues with that, And again, you can go and check any user got phished from this group of people who are assigned to the Chinese project. So this is like some ways you can actually use NIST framework to map out the different processes, the different activities in organization, and to respond to it. Right. Now, the website I showed you earlier has all these examples on different cybersecurity frameworks. I will not go through this, but in nutshell, basically you need to go and understand your organization. What are your business objectives and scope, and understand the context. What are the regulations? What are the environment you operate? Understand your current profile. So you might do an audit or a risk assessment or pen testing to understand all the different gaps, and conduct a risk assessment to identify what is the impact of those risks identified from the step number 3, example, the pen test, audit, and so on, and create a target profile on where you want to be, prioritize the actions, and implement an action plan. So I will show this slide. It's probably much more better. So on the left-hand side, you see where are we now. So again, you might have done a pen test, you might have done an audit or assessments, and you notice that you don't have security framework, there's no data classification, there's no vulnerability management program, you have a lack of multi-factor authentication, and the security awareness training is not documented or not performed, and so on. So you identify these issues on where we are now. And next is that you create a cybersecurity program. And before that, you understand where you want to be. Like you want to integrate a framework, you want the data to be audited, you want the critical assets identified. So this is your end state. So you identify your end state and then create a program like documenting policies, creating a framework, implementing the SIM, data backup, and so on. And you can put a timeline. Right? So this is an example of how we can create a security program by using NIST, and this applies to any other framework as well. Right. Now, I think I want to probably come, this is almost towards the end of the presentation. So while we have ISO and NIST and so on, it has a lot of controls. Like some of the standards has over 500 controls. It may be too difficult to implement all of them. But if you focus for any business, if you focus on the most basic ones, like firstly, improve security awareness of your users, ensure the patches are implemented on timely basis, turn on your MFAs, ensure the applications are controlled, meaning that only authorized applications are allowed to be installed, check your admin privileges and your privilege access management, and take regular backups. These controls alone will prevent you most of the attacks, right? So that's where probably you have to start from, and then go and build up on other controls there. Right. So again, you can go back to the website and take a look at the different products available there. So this webinar was basically an introduction to NIST or what is it about. But then Apex Global do have plans to have further detailed courses. So using NIST, we have a course, a 2-day program on improving your cybersecurity posture, where we go in detail about the different functions and how we can create a cybersecurity program using these functions with some workshops and exercises. So that's one program planned. And there's also using the NIST framework. This is the other one. Yeah, I think both. Right. So I'm just conscious of time. So if you have any last minute question, I can take them. Otherwise, I'll hand over to the Apex Global team.
Hello, sir. You have actually a question from Jan. So his question is, what would you consider as common impediments faced by organizations starting out with NIST?
I think the biggest issue is that getting the executive buy-in, because most companies do realize they need to improve security. But then when you're implementing something like NIST, it talks about a framework, it talks about creating a security program. So one of the slides I showed before, we talk about the different program. So this involves procuring software or training people, procuring services. And in this example, it's a 2.5 years program. So I think the biggest issue is that getting your company's management to approve or accept these kind of programs or to get the buy-in. I think that's the biggest issue. And the second biggest issue is the people. I think getting awareness is the main thing I would say. Like, we may have the best of class controls, but then people are still the weakest link. So that's still the issue there. Right. So we are right on the top of the hour. So I will just thank you again, everyone, for participating, and we hope to see you in the future programs. I will pass this to Apex Global team. Yeah.
So thank you for that wonderful insight, Mr. Vivek. So just for a quick survey for all of us, the survey link will be posted on the chat box for your convenience. So kindly fill this out and we will reveal the surprise soon. In the meantime, while everyone fills out the survey, we're happy to take questions for the meantime. And as we are waiting, hold on to your seats because it's time to unveil a special surprise after this.
So yeah, Ina, since we do have a surprise, so here it is. Let me just present it. So here we actually have not just one but three surprises. So for the exclusive event bonus, we, as an esteemed attendee of today's event, we are actually thrilled to extend an exclusive privilege to experience our renowned signature programs with an added touch of value. All of you who attended today can join a remarkable 5% augmentation on our exceptional offerings. As for the team enrollment advantage, elevate your team's capabilities with our distinguished signature programs. By registering your esteemed team, you unlock an exceptional opportunity and embark on a transformative learning journey with our buy three, get one offer, enhancing your team skills while optimizing your investment. Please use the promo code displayed on the screen while registering. Also, keep in keep an eye on the chat box as we would be sharing a link that holds a takeaway. So I am certain that this helps you in safeguarding your organization from various threats, and it is our way of saying thank you for your active engagement and commitment to enhancing your cybersecurity prowess. Also, please get in touch with us via training at apexgloballearning.com, which would be sent here in our chat box. So, once again, thank you, Mr. Vivek, for your remarkable presentation, and thank you to all our participants for being a part of this insightful journey, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.